There is nowhere left to hide for Iran's regime anymore, with its air defenses shattered. The US has achieved a level of air supremacy that had yet to be seen. In Operation Epic Fury, how do we know? B-52s are in the skies, and they're flying over land. They're dropping something that Iran can't come back from, and they're doing it over and over again to ignite a chain reaction collapse. There are fireballs over Iran right now, as B-52s hunt Iran's last bunkers to extinction. This is a huge change in America's aerial strategy, and it's been announced by no less than the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, U.S. Air Force General Dan Kane. During a March 31st briefing to the Department of Defense, Kane revealed that the U.S. is so confident in the air supremacy that it's achieved in Iran's skies that it's deploying B-52 bombers overland. For the first time in the campaign, these Cold War-era bombers, which entered service in 1961, allow the U.S. to carry out more intense bombing runs against Iran's bunkers and military nodes than ever before, and they're able to fly because the first 30 days of Operation Epic Fury have done such a good job of shattering the layered air defense network that Iran built up to prevent the arrival of precisely this kind of aerial platform. Kane made all of this very clear with his statement. As he said, given the increase in air superiority, we have successfully started to conduct the first overland B-52 missions, which allow us to continue to get on top of the enemy. Those overland missions involve the use of GBU-31 bunker-busting munitions, which deliver 2,000 pounds of terrifying firepower. Those bombs are dropping on key locations in Isfahan right now, as you'll soon discover if you keep watching. The BBC reports that eagle-eyed military watchers may have detected that something like this was coming. It says that hints of this latest evolution in the American campaign were seen at RAF Fairford, where B-52 bombers are being stationed in preparation for attacks against Iran. Just days before Kane made a statement that BBC says B-52s and other aircraft were seen taking off from this UK airbase, loaded with the very types of JDAMs that we're now seeing being dropped everywhere. The US has also shifted to a strategy of dynamic targeting, Kane reveals, which means that all of its aircraft are being given new targets as they fly, and in some cases, they're even being tasked with locating and attacking targets. By themselves, what all of this tells us is that the US no longer has air superiority over Iran. It has air supremacy after all. This isn't the first time that the B-52s have been used in Iran. As early into Operation Epic Fury as March 4th, Military Times was reporting that the US had used its oldest bomber to attack Iran. But if that's the case, then what makes what we're seeing right now so important? The answer is something that has changed Iran, and that change can be seen in one keyword that Kane used when announcing the arrival of more B-52 bombers overlap. The earlier B-52s were armed with standoff munitions, such as the AGM-15-8 Jasamwar cruise missile, rather than the bunker-busting bombs that they're now dropping over Iraq. This meant that the US still felt that it needed to be cautious with its older bombers earlier in Operation Epic Fury. They needed to attack from range rather than get up close and personal. What was likely happening before was that American stealth fighters, loaded with sensors such as the F-35 and F-22, were finding safe aerial corridors for the B-52s, which would arrive, deliver their munitions, and then fly away before Iran's air defenses were able to catch up to them. Now the situation is different. The 52s are flying over land, which means that they're penetrating Iranian airspace, deep over the mainland. The air superiority that enabled earlier B-52 strikes has evolved into air supremacy that makes these overland strikes possible. And there is one city in Iran that is feeling the pain in the next phase of B-52 usage more than any other: Isfahan. The city is already famous for being the site of underground nuclear facilities that the US has struck with massive bunker-busting bombs in the past. Most notably, the US deployed B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, armed with 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrators, to take out the Isfahan nuclear facilities. During Operation Midnight Hammer in the summer of 2025, those facilities survived well enough to make Isfahan the likely site of the enriched uranium Iran still has, which could be used to build a nuclear weapon. But beyond these nuclear facilities, Isfahan is home to several other military nodes, and it's those that we're now starting to see the US B-52s target as they move deeper into overland territory. The footage shows that several videos are emerging from Iran of bombing runs that are causing chain reactions of explosions throughout one of the country's most important cities. AP News has shared a compilation of some of these videos, all of which were shot by eyewitnesses in the city. For over 40 seconds, we see the same thing over and over again. Earth-rattling explosions send enormous fireballs hurtling into the sky, accompanied by huge plumes of smoke. In some cases, we can see entire chain reactions of explosions, suggesting either the dropping of multiple bombs or secondary explosions. caused by munitions that are being destroyed on the ground. The US isn't being shy about sharing this footage itself. US President Donald Trump has used his Truth Social account to share footage of a chain reaction of strikes that are seen in brief in the AP News video. This longer version of the video also potentially reveals the types of targets that the US has been hitting. Now that it's deployed its B-52s over Isfahan, based on the size and nature of the explosions, it seems likely that America's bombs have landed on a hardened, underground ammunition depot in the key Iranian city. That implies the use of bunker busters, which we'll get to in a second. Sticking with Isfahan for a moment, the idea that the US just hit one of the city's ammunition depots with its B-52s is supported by the fact that Isfahan is home to an enormous missile complex, the Nuclear Threat Initiative says. This complex is the largest missile assembly and production site in Iran, and it was built in the 1980s with help from China and North Korea. It's here where Iran has developed the Shahab 4 system, which many in the West believe is designed to serve as a launch vehicle for Iran's long-range weapons. Iran also builds M-class missiles and Chinese HY-2 silkworms in Isfahan, the Nuclear Threat Initiative says, all of which tells us that there is plenty of explosive ammunition lying under the ground in this Iranian city. And that brings us back to the bunker busters. According to Al Jazeera, the US hasn't limited its B-52 bomber runs to Isfahan. Tehran and several other Iranian cities have also been targeted, such as Karaj, which is home to several industrial areas. However, it was the bunker busters over Isfahan, most likely the 2,000-pound bombs we mentioned earlier, that captured all the headlines. Beyond those seen in the footage we've shared so far, Al Jazeera says that the US dropped several of its powerful bunker busters into the mountainous region surrounding Isfahan, leading to yet more secondary explosions, presumably as Iran's ammunition and missile stockpiles went up in flames. The same outlet adds that the US bombing campaign has also seen it target key parts of Iran's industrial infrastructure, such as steel manufacturing plants, petrochemical plants, and even nuclear facilities. So the US is switching over from targeting military nodes alone to using its B-52s to snatch away Iran's means of production. Operation Epic Fury is transitioning into a more attritional campaign, and the B-52s are at the center of it. However, they may also be at the center of something else, which has caught everybody off guard. Back to what nobody saw coming in Isfahan. We mentioned earlier that Isfahan seems to be the most likely storage site for the enriched uranium. Some believe Iran is keeping that uranium so it can maintain its threat of developing a nuclear dirty bomb. Iran has almost 1,000 pounds of this uranium, which has been enriched to 60% of the explosive U-235 isotope and doesn't need much more work to bring it up to the 90% level of enrichment needed to make a nuke. The US doesn't want Iran to have this uranium. It wants to strip Iran's nuclear capabilities so badly that rumors are surfacing that the US is preparing a daring ground campaign that would see it land Special Forces troops at Isfahan. Those troops, the rumors suggest, would be targeted with extracting Iran's uranium from the city's underground nuclear bunker and then getting out again. Rather than holding the location, it's a daring plan that comes with a lot of danger. Every minute that the US troops spend at the Isfahan site will be a minute where they're vulnerable to Iran's missiles and drones. That's where the B-52s come into play. Ynet News pauses. Pyrotechnics that have accompanied the strikes in Isfahan are all well and good, but they may be designed to obscure America's true objectives. It suggests that what we might be seeing in the city right now is a concerted effort by the US to effectively bury the enriched uranium believed to be stored at Isfahan. The idea here would be to use bunker-busting bombs, such as those carried by B-52s, to collapse the tunnels leading to Iran's uranium storage sites. If the US can pull this off, Ynet says, it would make those sites inaccessible to Iran for a year or more, which in turn means that the US won't have to risk sending in special forces to extract the harmful material. It's a theory that starts to make sense the more you think about it. The bunker busters, for which we have evidence, all seem to target explosive sites, such as Iran's ammunition depots. Those designed to collapse the Isfahan tunnel networks would have been much harder to spot. They would burrow underground and explode, causing obvious effects if you're close to the site, but massive fireballs don't erupt into the sky when tunnels collapse. You'll see smoke and debris, of course, but not the pyrotechnics. Could those headline-grabbing B-52 strikes for what the US really sent its B-52s into Isfahan to do? Ynet seems to think so. It claims that the US bombers carefully coordinated their strikes so that they collapsed tunnels without destroying the uranium itself, which the outlet says is now locked under 100 meters or almost 330 feet of solid rock. Perhaps the coming days will reveal that the US achieved a lot more than the already impressive and very obvious results we've seen so far. Iran, for its part, has tried to respond to America's B-52 onslaught in Isfahan. In its March 31st report on the strikes, The Times of India said that Iran responded to the attacks by launching a barrage of missiles in Israel's direction. Though most of these were intercepted or landed in open areas, and there were no immediate reports of casualties. Al Jazeera says differently. In an April 1st report that claims an Iranian ballistic missile launched at Israel hit its target, injuring 16 people in the process, Iran is still trying to send the message that it isn't going to back down, even as B-52s fly overhead unimpeded, though how realistic that message is up for debate. Given that the US is now claiming that Iran is seeking a ceasefire, before we get to that, we have to answer the question of how all of this is possible. The destruction of Iran's air defense network has already been widely reported. It was less than a week into Operation Epic Fury and Operation Roaring Lion that the Israeli Defense Forces were reporting that 80% of Iran's air defense systems were destroyed. That was a good starting point, but it wasn't quite enough for the air supremacy needed for the overland B-52 strikes that we're seeing now. That was a good starting point, but it wasn't quite enough for the air supremacy needed for the overland B-52 strikes we're seeing now. So the US and Israel continued to whittle away. By March 10th was reporting that most of their higher-end surface-to-air missile systems are non-factors at this point. When speaking about Iran's air defenses, adding that US fighter jets could now fly around with relative impunity. That's a real problem for Iran. The impunity for fighter jets has evolved into impunity for much slower and larger B-52 bomber because those jets can take out Iran's most advanced air defenses. Iran did have air defense systems that should have been able to hit the B-52. The Babar 373, which Iran built itself, has a maximum detection range of almost 200 miles, which is a long way above the 50,000-foot flight ceiling of the B. Army technology points out the S-300 PMU-2 air defense batteries that Iran purchased from Russia should also be able to target America's aging bomber. The problem is they can't. And the reason they can't is that almost all of them have been destroyed. The US is now so confident in its air supremacy that B-52s can fly almost anywhere in Iran without fear. We say almost because there will be isolated pockets of air defenses left in Iran. Whether ground-based systems or shoulder-mounted man-pads, these pockets could still present a threat. But that's where fighter jets, flying with impunity, help. Loaded with sensors, they can detect these threats and destroy them, or at the very least channel information to B-52 pilots, so they know what areas of Iran to avoid. Clearly, Iran has no real air defenses left in Isfahan. The volley of strikes B-52s have been carrying out in that city are proof of that upgrades to the B-52 may also be contributing to the overland strikes that we're starting to see. Key among them is the radar modernization program that the US Air Force has developed for the aging bomber. Business Insider says that the radar upgrades the B-52 is receiving are making it more effective against electronic warfare techniques, which takes another arrow out of the Iranian defensive quiver. The first ferry fight of a B-52 with this new radar system took place in December 2025, so the bombers currently flying in Iran's airspace may have been equipped with it. What all of this means for Iran is that a bomber that its layered air defense network was meant to make mincemeat out of is able to fly anywhere it wants, because that network is no more. That was already a problem. When the B-52 was being deployed as a carrier of standoff munitions, with its 70,000-pound payload capacity, America's oldest bomber can deliver more firepower in one sitting than anything else in the country's aerial arsenal. But now the massive payload is being combined with the versatility that makes the B-52 so famous. The US Air Force itself states the B-52 is capable of launching the widest array of weapons of any aircraft in the US inventory, along with being able to deliver more gravity bombs, precision-guided missiles, JDIM is bunker cluster bombs, mines, and even nuclear warheads can be loaded into this beast of an aircraft. So having B-52s flying over land means that Iran never knows which problem it's going to face next. Earlier in Operation Epic Fury, it was standoff munitions. In Isfahan over the last couple of days, it seems to have been bunker busters. Tomorrow it could be something else. There's no real way of guessing until the firepower hits home. And that's a major problem for Iran's regime. This sort of thing is precisely what the B-52 was built to do. It's not the flashiest aircraft in the world. Nobody is looking at it with the same level of admiration they reserve for the F-35 or B-2, which are both sleek, stylish, and stealthy, but they are the scalpels of the US Air Force. The B-52 is the wrecking ball. And when a country is so utterly bereft of air defenses as Iran, that wrecking ball can swing over and over again with its versatility, giving it the option to take part in the dynamic, targeting aspects of Operation Epic Fury. Kane says the US is now starting to execute. Iran doesn't have any real options left for dealing with America's B-52s. And this is where we might see another shift in the operation. We mentioned earlier that US President Donald Trump has claimed that Iran is looking for a ceasefire. Now that it knows the B-52s are in the skies, He's taken to Truth Social to say as much, stating Iran's new regime president, much less radicalized and far more intelligent than his predecessors, has just asked the United States of America for a ceasefire. Trump says that the U.S. will consider a ceasefire if Iran reopens the Strait of Hormuz, so the B-52 sorties will at least continue until then. But there's a twist, just as it did. When Trump claimed that negotiations had started with Iran, when it claimed the U.S. was negotiating with itself, Iran's regime says there has been no request for a ceasefire. In a March 31st report, Abbas Araghchi said that Iran's country isn't seeking a ceasefire. What Iran wants is a complete end to hostilities, combined with guarantees against future attacks and compensation for the damage that the U.S. has done so far during Operation Epic Fury. It seems very unlikely that the U.S. will agree to those conditions, so perhaps talk of any halt, be that a ceasefire or something more permanent, is premature, or maybe it isn't. In yet another twist, Trump has declared that no deal may be needed. In an April 1st report, the BBC says the president believes that his country will be able to finish the job in Iran within the next 2 or 3 weeks. That appears to mean that the U.S. will be happy to withdraw once it's sure that Iran isn't able to build a nuclear weapon, regardless of whether Iran's regime wants to come to the table. We've set them back 15 to 20 years. They have no navy, no military, no air force, Trump claims, leaving only the nuclear question left over. Perhaps the B-52s are the answer to that question. If their bunker busters have been deployed to cave in Iran's tunnel network, as Inet claims, then Iran may no longer be able to access its enriched uranium. Another 2 or 3 weeks of B-52 strikes could take out production facilities and centrifuges, while causing yet more damage to a military that Trump claims has been set back for decades. Maybe now all that's left is for the B-52s to hunt the last Iranian bunkers to extinction. If they succeed, a deal won't mean much to the U.S. The B-52 is far from the only old aerial platform that the U.S. can deploy in Iran, right now that it's achieved air supremacy. A-10 Warthogs are also hitting Iran so hard that the regime thought that it was the end of the world, combining loitering capabilities and a versatile loadout. These attack aircraft are operating in Iran right now, and you can find out all about them in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show to see more of our Operation Epic Fury analysis, and thank you for watching.